The millionaire abducted a poor girl on the eve of her wedding, but on the next night, she learned. I'm sure you've heard the saying, you never know what's coming next. But what if something completely unexpected happened just before your life was about to change forever? Hi everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive right into today's story. On the eve of her wedding, Sophie thought she had everything planned out, until a moment of complete chaos changed everything. Sophie was a woman who had worked hard all her life, a humble waitress with big dreams. She had grown up in a small town raised by her single mother after her father left them. She always dreamed of a simple life, surrounded by people she loved, and tonight, she was about to marry the love of her life, Mark. They had been together for 5 years, and Sophie thought she had found her perfect match. But that night, everything went terribly wrong. As she walked down the hallway of her small apartment, she couldn't shake the nervousness in her stomach. It wasn't the kind of nervousness she felt before a normal event, it was something more intense, something about the uncertainty of the future. Sophie knew this wedding was her way of escaping her past, leaving behind the long hours of work and constant struggle to get by. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter for her and Mark. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time, her white dress clinging to her figure, the soft fabric catching the light in a way that made her look like a vision of perfection. She smiled at her reflection, adjusting her veil and taking a deep breath. It was the most important day of her life. But as Sophie was about to leave, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it, expecting to find Mark standing there, but to her surprise, there was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, with an air of confidence that immediately unsettled her. "Who are you?" Sophie asked, her voice shaky, but she tried to sound calm. The man smiled faintly, his eyes cold but full of something that she couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry, miss. There's been a mistake." Before Sophie could react, the man grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out of the apartment, dragging her into a car waiting outside. Panic surged through her as she struggled against his grip, but it was no use. He was strong, and before long, Sophie was sitting in the back of a luxury car, her heart pounding in her chest. What was happening? Who was this man? And why was he doing this to her? She could barely catch her breath as the car sped through the city streets. Everything felt like a blur. She couldn't make sense of it, her entire world was spinning out of control. Sophie tried to scream, but the man's grip tightened, forcing her to remain silent. She glanced out of the window, but all she could see was the fast-moving scenery, the streetlights flashing by, and the sound of the tires screeching as they made sharp turns. Sophie's mind raced with questions, but no answers came. Who would do something like this? Why her? And why on her wedding day of all days? The car finally stopped in front of an imposing building. It looked like a high-end hotel or maybe a private mansion, definitely not the kind of place someone like her would ever step foot in. The man opened the door and helped her out of the car, not with kindness but with cold efficiency. He didn't say a word as he led her into the building. As they entered the lobby, Sophie's nerves intensified. She was in complete shock, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had no idea who this man was, what he wanted with her, or what was going to happen next. All she knew was that her wedding was no longer happening, and the life she had been dreaming of was slipping through her fingers. What was he going to do to her? Sophie couldn't fathom it. She had never felt more out of place, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to control her breathing. The man led her up the stairs, his grip never loosening, and all Sophie could do was follow, her mind consumed by fear and confusion. She didn't know what awaited her at the top of the stairs, but she knew one thing for sure: her life would never be the same again. I'm sure you've heard the saying, you never know what's coming next. But what if something completely unexpected happened just before your life was about to change forever? Hi everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive right into today's story. On the eve of her wedding, Sophie thought she had everything planned out, until a moment of complete chaos changed everything. Sophie was a woman who had worked hard all her life, a humble waitress with big dreams. She had grown up in a small town raised by her single mother after her father left them. She always dreamed of a simple life, surrounded by people she loved, and tonight, she was about to marry the love of her life, Mark. They had been together for 5 years, and Sophie thought she had found her perfect match. But that night, everything went terribly wrong. As she walked down the hallway of her small apartment, she couldn't shake the nervousness in her stomach. It wasn't the kind of nervousness she felt before a normal event, it was something more intense, something about the uncertainty of the future. Sophie knew this wedding was her way of escaping her past, leaving behind the long hours of work and constant struggle to get by. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter for her and Mark. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time, her white dress clinging to her figure, the soft fabric catching the light in a way that made her look like a vision of perfection. She smiled at her reflection, adjusting her veil and taking a deep breath. It was the most important day of her life. But as Sophie was about to leave, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it, expecting to find Mark standing there, but to her surprise, there was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, with an air of confidence that immediately unsettled her. "Who are you?" Sophie asked, her voice shaky, but she tried to sound calm. The man smiled faintly, his eyes cold but full of something that she couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry, miss. There's been a mistake." Before Sophie could react, the man grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out of the apartment, dragging her into a car waiting outside. Panic surged through her as she struggled against his grip, but it was no use. He was strong, and before long, Sophie was sitting in the back of a luxury car, her heart pounding in her chest. What was happening? Who was this man? And why was he doing this to her? She could barely catch her breath as the car sped through the city streets. Everything felt like a blur. She couldn't make sense of it, her entire world was spinning out of control. Sophie tried to scream, but the man's grip tightened, forcing her to remain silent. She glanced out of the window, but all she could see was the fast-moving scenery, the streetlights flashing by, and the sound of the tires screeching as they made sharp turns. Sophie's mind raced with questions, but no answers came. Who would do something like this? Why her? And why on her wedding day of all days? The car finally stopped in front of an imposing building. It looked like a high-end hotel or maybe a private mansion, definitely not the kind of place someone like her would ever step foot in. The man opened the door and helped her out of the car, not with kindness but with cold efficiency. He didn't say a word as he led her into the building. As they entered the lobby, Sophie's nerves intensified. She was in complete shock, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had no idea who this man was, what he wanted with her, or what was going to happen next. All she knew was that her wedding was no longer happening, and the life she had been dreaming of was slipping through her fingers. What was he going to do to her? Sophie couldn't fathom it. She had never felt more out of place, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to control her breathing. The man led her up the stairs, his grip never loosening, and all Sophie could do was follow, her mind consumed by fear and confusion. She didn't know what awaited her at the top of the stairs, but she knew one thing for sure: her life would never be the same again. As Sophie followed the man up the grand staircase, her heart raced faster with every step. She was still in shock, trying to make sense of what had just happened. One moment, she was preparing for the most important day of her life, and the next, she was being dragged into a situation that felt like a nightmare. She had no idea where they were going or what was going to happen next. Her mind was swirling with questions that had no answers. Who was this man? Why had he taken her? What did he want? She couldn't even scream for help, not with the way he held her arm tightly, his grip unrelenting. Every step felt heavier as they reached the top of the stairs and entered a large, dimly lit room. The door closed behind them with a quiet thud, and Sophie felt a sense of finality wash over her. She was trapped. The man still hadn't said a word, but Sophie could feel his presence, cold, commanding, and strangely detached. As she stood there, trying to catch her breath, he stepped away, finally breaking the silence. "Sit," he said, his voice low and firm. Sophie didn't move. "I said, sit." His voice was sharp now, leaving no room for hesitation. Hesitantly, Sophie sat down in one of the chairs placed by the large windows, the only source of light in the room. She glanced around, but there was no escape in sight. The room was luxurious, too luxurious. The expensive furniture, the grand piano sitting in the corner, the ornate paintings on the walls, everything about the place screamed wealth and power. It was nothing like her apartment, nothing like the life she had been living. She felt out of place, like an intruder in someone else's world. The man, now standing by the window, looked out at the city skyline. He seemed unfazed by the situation, as though this was all part of his plan. Sophie couldn't understand why he was doing this. Her mind kept racing back to her wedding, the excitement she had felt just hours ago. She had been ready to marry Mark, the man she loved. So why was she here, in this mansion, with a stranger? Why was this happening to her? She wanted to ask him, but the words wouldn't come. She could barely think straight. The silence in the room grew heavier as the minutes passed. Sophie tried to steady her breathing, but her nerves were getting the best of her. She needed to know more, to understand why this was happening. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. The man didn't turn to face her. Instead, he kept staring out the window, his expression unreadable. "What do you want?" Sophie asked again, this time with more urgency. Slowly, the man turned to face her, his eyes cold but strangely calculating. "I need you to listen carefully," he said, his voice steady. Sophie didn't know whether to be relieved that he was finally speaking or more terrified by what he might say next. "I didn't bring you here for nothing," he continued. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you need to understand that I'm in control now. And you're going to stay here, with me, for as long as it takes." Sophie's stomach twisted in knots. "For as long as it takes," she repeated, her voice shaking. "What does that mean?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward her and stood in front of her. His presence was overwhelming, and Sophie instinctively recoiled. He noticed the fear in her eyes and seemed to take some kind of satisfaction in it. "You're going to stay here because I have a proposition for you," he said slowly, his voice almost casual now. "A business proposition." Sophie frowned, confusion taking over her fear. "A business proposition? What are you talking about? I don't understand." The man smiled, his lips curling into a small, almost smug grin. "You don't have to understand everything right now. But trust me, Sophie, when you do, you'll see why this is happening." Sophie's heart pounded in her chest. The way he said her name sent chills down her spine. How did he know her name? She had never seen him before in her life. "How do you know?" "Who I am?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile didn't falter. "I know more about you than you think," he said cryptically. "I've been watching you for a while." Sophie felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Watching her? What did that even mean? She wanted to ask more questions, but she knew better than to press him further. The tension in the room was palpable, and she could feel the weight of his gaze on her as she tried to make sense of everything. "So, what now?" she asked, finally finding her voice again. "What do you want from me?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the grand piano and sat down, his fingers brushing the keys lightly. He seemed lost in thought, as if the answer to her question was something that only he could know. You'll understand soon enough, he said, his voice low. But for now, just know that your life is about to change. Sophie felt a wave of dread wash over her as she sat there, staring at him, unsure of what would happen next. Her wedding was gone, her life was in turmoil, and she had no idea how or why she had ended up in this situation. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. I know this seems impossible, Sophie, he continued, his fingers still resting lightly on the piano keys, the sound of them echoing softly in the large, empty room, but you have to trust me. I'm not your enemy. Sophie's mind was still racing. How could she trust someone who had done this to her? How could she believe anything this man said when he had completely turned her world upside down? But there was something in his voice, something that sounded genuine, even though everything in her screamed that he was lying. Trust you, she repeated, the words coming out more like a question than a statement. She shook her head. How can I trust you? You kidnapped me, took me away from my wedding, and brought me here, to God knows where. And now you're asking me to trust you. The man, whose name Sophie still didn't know, looked at her, his expression unreadable. He was calm, almost too calm for someone who had just pulled off something as extreme as this. I understand how you feel, he said, standing up and walking over to a nearby chair. But I didn't have much of a choice. This wasn't something I wanted to do, but it's something I had to do. Sophie looked at him, her anger building. Had to do, she asked, her voice rising. You had to kidnap me? You had to ruin my life? Do you even realize what you've done? The man sighed and rubbed his temples, as if the situation was somehow wearing him down. You don't understand, he said softly, as though speaking to himself more than her. This is bigger than you or me. I'm not asking you to understand right now. I'm asking you to trust that what I'm doing is for the best, for both of us. Sophie couldn't believe what she was hearing. This man was completely out of touch with reality, or maybe he thought he could control everything, including her emotions. For the best. Sophie's voice trembled, but she was determined to stand her ground. You have no right to make that decision for me. You can't just decide what's best for me. I have my own life, my own plans, my own future. And you've ruined all of it. The man walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate, but there was a calmness about him that Sophie couldn't ignore. He stopped right in front of her, his gaze locking with hers, and for the first time since this all began, Sophie saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that almost looked like regret. I'm sorry for the way things have gone, he said quietly. But there's more at stake here than you realize. Sophie blinked, confused by his sudden change in tone. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaky. What's at stake? What could possibly be more important than what you've done to me? The man hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. It's not just about you, Sophie, he said slowly, carefully. There's a much bigger picture here. I'm not just some rich man playing games. The reason I brought you here is because I need you. I need your help to fix something that's out of my control. Sophie's mind was spinning, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't make sense of anything he was saying. What are you talking about? She demanded. What could you possibly need me for? The man leaned forward, his face inches from hers, and for the first time, Sophie felt a sense of vulnerability from him, something real. I'm in danger, Sophie, he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. And so are you. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, barely able to speak. Who's after you? What danger are you in? The man stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I can't explain everything to you right now, he said, but I can tell you this, if you don't help me, both of us are going to be in serious trouble. And there's no way out unless we work together. Sophie felt the weight of his words sink in. She had no idea what kind of danger he was talking about, but the fear in his eyes was enough to make her reconsider everything. She was no longer just a victim of some random act of violence, there was something much more complicated happening here. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of relief, it was one of knowing. First, he said, you need to listen to me. I'm not asking for your trust yet. I just need you to listen, and then, maybe, you'll understand why I did what I did. Sophie nodded slowly, trying to take in everything he was saying. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she had no choice. Her whole world had been upended, and she had to figure out how to navigate this mess, whether she liked it or not. The man turned to leave, but paused at the door. I'll be back later, he said. Don't go anywhere. Sophie stared at the door as he walked out. She was alone again, her mind a whirlwind of questions, confusion, and fear. She had no idea what was going on, but one thing was clear, nothing was as it seemed, and she was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. I sat in the chair, waiting in silence, the weight of the man's words echoing in my mind. What did he mean by danger? What did he need me for? I couldn't stop thinking about it, the fear that had gripped me when he said we were both in trouble. How could this be happening? How could I have ended up here, in this extravagant mansion, with a man I didn't know, with no clear reason as to why I was even involved? I glanced around the room, the grandeur of it all making me feel small and insignificant. The thick velvet curtains, the shining crystal chandelier, the polished floors, it all seemed like a dream I didn't belong in. The door creaked open, and I froze. The man walked in, his expression unreadable, his presence still as imposing as ever. You're still here, he said, almost as if he were surprised. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. I had no choice. He had made it clear that I was stuck here, and the only way to understand what was going on was to hear him out. He didn't sit down, instead, he stood by the window, looking out over the sprawling estate, his back to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and the silence felt like it stretched on forever. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. You don't trust me, do you? He asked, breaking the silence. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. He was right, I didn't trust him. How could I? But there was a part of me, a small part, that felt like he wasn't lying. That somehow, his intentions weren't entirely bad. I understand, he said after a moment, his voice softening. I didn't expect you to trust me immediately. But I need you to understand something. He turned to face me, his eyes locking with mine. I'm not your enemy, Sophie. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm trying to protect you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Protect me? After everything that had happened, how could he possibly think he was protecting me? You're trying to protect me, I said, my voice shaky with disbelief. You kidnapped me, dragged me away from my wedding, and locked me in this place, and now you think you're protecting me. His expression didn't change, but his gaze softened. Yes, Sophie, he said, his tone steady. And I'll explain why, but first, I need you to hear me out. I was still processing what he had said, my heart pounding. Why should I listen to you? I asked, my voice rising slightly. After everything you've done, why should I trust anything you say? He sighed, rubbing his temples, like the weight of the conversation was getting to him. I get it, you're angry, and you have every right to be. But there's more going on here than you realize. I didn't want to do this. But I didn't have a choice. He paused, as if he was searching for the right words. I have enemies, Sophie. Powerful enemies who will stop at nothing to get what they want. I've been targeted for years, and I've been trying to find a way out. But I can't do it alone. I swallowed hard, the fear creeping back into my chest. And you think I can help you? I asked. Why me? Why would you choose me? He looked at me then, his eyes intense, almost as if he were pleading. You're the only one who can help me, Sophie. You have no idea what's at stake here, but you're the key. I need you to understand that. His words were almost too much for me to process. I sat there, trying to make sense of what he was saying, trying to understand why he thought I had any power in this situation. What do you mean, I'm the key? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer to me, his gaze never leaving mine. You're the only one who can help me stop what's coming, he said, his voice urgent. I can't do this without you, Sophie. I need you to trust me. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of his words settling over me. This was bigger than I had imagined. I had no idea what kind of danger he was talking about, but the seriousness in his voice told me it wasn't something I could ignore. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice shaking. Tell me what I need to do. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Then, finally, he spoke. I'm going to take you to a place where you'll be safe, he said. But you have to promise me something. You have to promise that you won't run, that you'll stay with me and help me. I'm not asking for your trust right now. I'm asking for your cooperation. I didn't know what to say. I was trapped, caught between fear and curiosity, between the desire to escape and the need to understand what was really happening. I looked at him, unsure of what my next move should be. But somehow, I knew I didn't have much of a choice. Okay, I whispered. I'll help you. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Thank you, Sophie, he said. You won't regret this. And just like that, I had entered a world that I couldn't escape from, a world that was much darker and more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. I followed the man in silence, still trying to process everything he had said. I couldn't believe I was agreeing to this. I was helping a man who had kidnapped me, a man who was somehow involved in a dangerous world that I didn't understand. The whole situation felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't wake up from. But as we walked, I felt an odd sense of resolve building inside me. Maybe it was the fear of what might happen if I didn't go along with him. Maybe it was the growing sense of confusion, not knowing who to trust or what to believe. Either way, there was no turning back now. We entered a large, modern building, one that looked like it belonged to someone important. It was sleek, cold, and completely different from the mansion where we had been. I was immediately aware of the contrast. This wasn't a place for someone like me, a waitress from a small town who had no idea what the world of power and wealth truly looked like. We walked down a long hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the quiet space. As we reached the end of the hallway, the man turned to me, his eyes serious. This is where you'll stay for now, he said, his voice calm but firm. You'll be safe here, Sophie. No one can get to you. I looked around the room he had led me to. It was a small apartment, furnished simply but elegantly. There was a large bed, a sitting area with a few chairs, and a desk by the window. The view was incredible, overlooking the city, with lights twinkling below. But even with all the luxury, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still a prisoner. I don't feel safe, I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound confident. The man sighed, looking at me with something akin to sympathy. I know this is hard, Sophie. But you have to trust me. I'm not doing this because I want to hurt you. I'm doing this because I need your help. And once this is all over, I'll make sure you're free to go. His words didn't make me feel better. How could they? He had taken me from my life, from my wedding, and now he was asking me to trust him. But even as I stood there, my heart heavy with uncertainty, part of me knew that I had no other choice. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why did you choose me? He looked at me for a moment before replying. I told you before, Sophie. You're the key to stopping this. You don't know everything yet, but you will soon. I can't do this alone. I need you by my side. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was a sincerity there that made me hesitate. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice softer this time. The man stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I need you to trust me, he said. That's the first step. You don't have to believe everything I say right now, but you have to at least believe that I'm trying to protect you. The danger isn't just from people who want to hurt me, it's from people who want to hurt you too. I won't let that happen. I nodded slowly, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew that if I didn't follow his lead, I might never get the answers I was looking for. Okay, I said finally, my voice trembling but determined. I'll help you. But I need to know what's going on. I need to understand why this is happening. He nodded, his expression softening. You will, Sophie. But first, I need to make sure you're safe. Stay here. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back soon. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I looked around the apartment again, trying to make sense of everything. This place was far from home, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a temporary safe haven. What was really going on here? Who was this man, and why did he say I was the key to something bigger? My mind raced, but I couldn't come up with any answers. All I could do was wait for him to come back and tell me more. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble I had gotten myself into. And whether I would ever be able to get out. I sat quietly in the room, the minutes ticking by slowly as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. The man, whose name I still didn't know, had left me alone with nothing but my confusion and fear. I couldn't believe I was here, stuck in this luxurious, yet cold apartment, unsure of what would happen next. I had been so close to starting my new life with Mark, my fiancé, and now I was trapped in a situation I didn't understand, held by a man who claimed he was protecting me. But from what? And why me? I couldn't answer those questions, not yet. I stood up from the chair and walked over to the large window. The city lights below twinkled like stars, and for a moment, I could almost forget the nightmare I was living. It was a fleeting thought, though, as reality quickly set back in. My wedding was supposed to happen today. I was supposed to be with Mark, starting our life together, but now I had no idea when, or if, I would see him again. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Was it him again? The man who had brought me here? Slowly, I walked to the door, trying to steady my breathing. When I opened it, I was surprised to find a woman standing there. She was tall, dressed in a professional-looking suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her expression was neutral, but there was something about her that made me uneasy. Sophie, right? She asked, her voice calm but firm. I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. Who are you? I asked. My voice shaky. The woman gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. My name is Claire. I'm here to help you. I felt a wave of skepticism wash over me. Help me? I repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. What do you mean, help me? Everyone here is either keeping secrets or acting like I'm some kind of prisoner. What's going on? Claire's smile faded, and she stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. I understand you have a lot of questions, and I know it's confusing, but I'm here to make sure you're safe, she said. You don't need to worry about the man who brought you here. He's doing what he has to do, but there's more going on than you realize. You're in a dangerous situation, Sophie, and you need to trust me when I say that your safety is our priority. I stared at her, still unsure. But I don't even know who you are. How do I know I can trust you? Claire sighed and took a step closer to me. I know it's hard, but you don't have much of a choice right now. You're part of something much bigger than you realize, and we need to keep you safe while we figure it out. The people who are after you, they're dangerous, Sophie. And they won't stop until they get what they want. I felt a chill run down my spine at the mention of danger, but at the same time, there was something in her voice, something reassuring, that made me pause. What do you mean, they're after me? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Claire hesitated, glancing at the door as if making sure no one else was listening. It's complicated, but the man who brought you here, he's not just some businessman. He's caught up in something far worse than you can imagine, and now you're involved too. It's not your fault, but you're in the middle of a very dangerous game, Sophie. And right now, we're trying to protect you." I could feel the weight of her words sinking in. I had no idea what she was talking about. The man who had kidnapped me was involved in something dangerous? And somehow, I was caught in the middle of it. It didn't make sense. "So, what do I do now?" I asked, my voice quiet, almost resigned. Claire smiled again, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "For now, you stay here. We'll keep you safe, and once things are clearer, we'll explain everything. But right now, all you need to know is that you're not alone. We're going to help you, but you have to trust us." I nodded slowly, unsure if I could fully trust her, but knowing that I had no other choice. I was stuck here, and I had no way of getting out on my own. Claire seemed to sense my hesitation. "I know this isn't easy, but you're strong, Sophie. You'll make it through this." Her words felt like a lifeline, even though I wasn't sure I could fully believe them. I looked out the window again, the lights of the city stretching out before me like a vast, unfamiliar world. I had no idea what was really happening, or what would come next, but one thing was certain: nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I stood there, staring out of the window, trying to absorb everything Claire had said. The weight of her words settled heavily in my chest. Dangerous game, powerful enemies, protecting me, it all sounded like something out of a spy movie, not real life. I had been taken from my life, my wedding day ruined, and now I was tangled in something I didn't understand. The city below me looked so peaceful, so ordinary, but here I was, trapped in a situation that made no sense at all. I heard Claire's footsteps behind me, and I turned to face her. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly, despite my efforts to stay calm. She walked over and sat down on the edge of the bed, her expression softening as she looked at me. "For now, just rest. Stay here and try to stay calm. I know this is a lot to take in, but I promise we're doing everything we can to protect you," she said. Her words, though calm, did little to ease the storm of questions and fears in my mind. How could they protect me when I didn't even know what I was being protected from? Who were these people, and why had I been dragged into their mess? Claire seemed to read the uncertainty in my eyes. "Look, I know you're scared. You have every right to be. But we need you to trust us. If we're going to get through this, we need to stick together," she said, her voice firm yet kind. "And I promise you, Sophie, you're not alone in this. We'll make sure you get through it." I couldn't help but feel a small sliver of hope at her words, but it was buried deep under the confusion and fear. I had no idea what was going on, but I also knew I didn't have many options. I couldn't leave, not with the danger Claire had warned me about, and certainly not with the man who had brought me here watching over everything. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll stay." Claire smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "Good," she said, standing up and heading towards the door. "I'll be back later. Just rest, and remember, you're safe here, for now." As she left, the door clicked softly behind her, and I was left alone once again. The room felt colder now, and the silence was deafening. I looked around at the lavish apartment that surrounded me, at the sleek furniture and expensive decor. It was beautiful, no doubt, but it felt like a prison. It was a reminder of everything I had lost, the life I thought I was going to have with Mark, my dreams of starting a family, all gone in an instant. I turned away from the window, unable to shake the feeling of dread that settled in my stomach. The man who had taken me here, he wasn't just some random stranger. There was something about him that made me uneasy, something hidden beneath the surface. He had claimed he was protecting me, but I didn't buy it. People didn't just kidnap others for their protection. There had to be more to the story. I lay down on the bed, trying to get some rest, but sleep didn't come. My mind was too loud with questions, with fear. What did Claire mean when she said I was the key? What was I involved in? And who exactly was after me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just a victim here. Somehow, I had become part of this twisted situation, and I didn't even know how or why. I couldn't just sit here and wait for answers. I had to do something. I had to figure out what was really going on. The only problem was, I had no idea where to start. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the door. I sat up quickly, my heart racing, wondering if the man was coming back. But the door opened, and to my surprise, it wasn't him, it was Claire. She looked at me with a sense of urgency in her eyes. "Sophie, we need to talk," she said, her voice serious. I stood up, immediately alert. "What's going on?" I asked, my pulse quickening. Claire glanced at the door before closing it behind her. "It's worse than we thought. The people after you, they found out where you are," she said, her tone grim. My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Claire took a deep breath, walking over to the window and looking out at the city below. "It means we don't have much time. You're in danger, Sophie. And we need to move quickly." My mind raced. I had barely been able to process the idea of being in danger, let alone the fact that someone was actively looking for me. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Claire turned to face me. "We're going to move you. It's not safe here anymore. We'll get you somewhere secure." I nodded, feeling the fear wash over me again. Everything was happening so fast, and I had no control over any of it. But one thing was clear, whatever was going on, I was in it now. And there was no turning back. I stood in the center of the room, the weight of Claire's words sinking in deeper with each passing second. The people after me had found my location. They knew where I was. A chill ran down my spine as the reality of the situation hit me. I wasn't just a random person caught in someone else's game anymore, I was part of it. And I had no idea how deep it went. Claire's face was serious, the lines of concern etched deeply into her features. "We need to leave now," she said, her voice steady but urgent. I felt a wave of panic surge through me, but I pushed it down, taking a deep breath. "How are we even going to get out of here?" I asked, my voice shaky, but I tried to mask my fear. "We'll go through the back," Claire said, her gaze darting around the room, as if making sure everything was secure. "You have to trust me, Sophie. I'm not leading you into danger. We're going to move quickly, and we won't stop until we're safe." I nodded, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Why was I involved in this? Who were these people, and what did they want from me? Claire moved toward the door, and I followed her, my heart hammering in my chest. Every noise, every movement, seemed amplified in the stillness of the apartment. We stepped into the hallway, and Claire looked around, making sure no one was in sight. "This way," she whispered, her tone barely audible. We walked swiftly through the quiet hallways of the building, and as we turned the corner, I saw a group of people up ahead. Claire's eyes widened, and she grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a door I hadn't noticed before. "We need to get out of here, now," she hissed. We rushed through the door, and it clicked shut behind us. The hallway was dimly lit, with only the faint hum of fluorescent lights above. Claire moved swiftly, her eyes scanning the space ahead. "Stay close," she instructed, as we hurried down the narrow corridor. The door behind us creaked open, and footsteps echoed from the hallway. My pulse quickened. I wanted to turn back, but Claire's grip tightened on my arm, pulling me forward. She led me to a small stairwell at the end of the hallway. "We're almost there," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was following us. "Just stay quiet, and don't make a sound." I nodded, but I felt my anxiety rising again. Every corner we turned felt like a risk, every second drawing us closer to danger. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, Claire stopped suddenly. "Wait," she said, her voice sharp. I froze, holding my breath. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire pressed her back against the wall, peering around the corner. "There's someone down there," she muttered, pointing to the far end of the corridor. I followed her gaze, but all I could see was a dark, empty hallway. "We need to be careful," Claire said, her eyes flicking to me, filled with concern. "If we can't get through this hallway, we'll be trapped." "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising in my chest again. Claire hesitated for a moment, her mind working quickly. "We take the elevator," she said, looking around the corner one last time. "I think it's safe. But we have to move now." We dashed toward the elevator, my heart pounding as I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. My mind was a blur, trying to process everything that had happened and everything Claire was telling me. We reached the elevator just in time, and Claire pressed the button to go down. The door slid open, and we stepped inside, the silence inside the small metal box seeming deafening. As the elevator began its descent, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. We were getting out, but that sense of relief was short-lived as the elevator suddenly stopped. The lights flickered once, then turned off completely. The silence was suffocating. My heart skipped a beat, and I could feel my breath quicken. "Claire?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer right away, and I could hear the tension in her breathing. "It's okay," she finally said, her voice calm but strained. "It's just the power. We'll be out in a second." But the second stretched into minutes. The elevator didn't budge. My anxiety was rising again, and I tried to steady my breathing, but it wasn't working. "What's happening?" I asked, the fear obvious in my voice now. "What's going on?" Claire remained calm, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. "Someone's tampered with the elevator," she said, her voice low and controlled. "We're stuck. But don't worry. We'll get out. Just stay calm." But the longer we stood there in the darkness, the more I realized that this wasn't just about getting out of the building. Something bigger was happening, something that was beyond our control. And we were running out of time. I felt my heart race as the elevator stood still in the pitch darkness, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I could hear Claire's breathing, steady but tense, but the moment stretched into eternity. I tried to calm myself, telling myself that everything would be okay, but the fear in my chest wouldn't go away. "Claire?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat. She didn't respond immediately. And when she did, her voice was calm but there was an edge to it. "We're fine," she said, though I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. "Just stay calm. They can't get us in here. This is temporary." But I could feel the panic creeping in. The elevator had stopped moving, and we were stuck, trapped in the dark with no way of knowing what was really happening. I wanted to scream, to do something, but all I could do was wait. The seconds felt like hours, and the fear began to eat at me, gnawing away at my resolve. My thoughts raced, filled with questions, with uncertainty. What were we running from? What had I gotten myself involved in? Why was I the one chosen for all of this? "What's really going on, Claire?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would somehow make the fear worse. There was a pause before she answered, and when she did, her voice was full of something I hadn't heard before, uncertainty. "I can't explain everything to you right now," she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. "But trust me, Sophie, we're doing everything we can. There's a reason you're involved in all this. You're the only one who can stop it. And that's why we're protecting you." The words sent a shiver through me, but I didn't know what they meant. "Stop what? And why me?" I thought about Mark, my fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry. What was happening to him? Was he even looking for me? Was he safe? I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that I was okay, but there was no way to contact him, no way to let him know what had happened. "Why me, Claire?" I asked again, my voice shaky. "Why am I the key to all of this? I'm just a waitress. I don't have anything special. I don't even understand what's going on." Claire didn't answer immediately. The only sound was the soft hum of the elevator's emergency lights flickering faintly in the dark. I could hear her exhale slowly, as if she were gathering her thoughts. "You're not just anyone, Sophie," she said, her voice quieter now, almost like she was speaking to herself. "You have something they need. Something that makes you important. But I can't explain it. All right now. You're not ready to hear it." The words left me even more confused than before. Something they needed? What could I possibly have that would make me important in all of this? Before I could ask more questions, the elevator jolted suddenly, and the lights flickered back on, revealing the cold, metallic walls. The door slid open with a soft chime, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw daylight, or at least the glow of the streetlights through a set of glass doors at the end of the hallway. "We're here," Claire said, her voice firm again, no trace of hesitation. "Let's go." I didn't ask questions. I followed her as we walked out of the elevator and into the bright, unfamiliar space. The place looked like a safe house, small, secure, almost military in its design. But I couldn't help but feel that it was only a temporary solution. We weren't safe here. Not for long. "Where are we?" I asked, looking around at the sparse, sterile room we had entered. Claire didn't answer right away, but her expression told me everything I needed to know. "We're safe for now," she said. "But we need to move quickly. Things are escalating." I nodded, though my heart still raced. "And then what?" I asked, finally voicing the question that had been on my mind since I was taken. "What's going to happen to me?" Claire looked at me, her eyes softening, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like compassion in her gaze. "You'll be okay, Sophie," she said, her voice reassuring. "We'll protect you. But you need to trust us. This is just the beginning. The danger's far from over. And once it's all over, I promise, we'll make sure you're safe." Her words did little to ease my fear, but they gave me a small sense of hope. I wasn't alone in this. There were people who cared enough to protect me, people who were fighting for my safety. And maybe, just maybe, they had the answers I was searching for. We moved quickly through the safe house, Claire guiding me with determination. But my mind kept drifting back to the unanswered questions, the ones that gnawed at me in the silence. What had I been pulled into? Who was behind all of this? And why was I, of all people, the one chosen to stop it? I didn't know the answers yet, but I was going to find them. I had no choice. My life had changed forever, and I needed to know the truth. Whatever it was, I was in this now. And there was no turning back.